what I want and I do it my way. I never try too hard.
This is Andrea Kolsky, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde. And today we're joined with very special guest, media consultant, reputation management expert, and somebody that has quite a long history in the biz, BTRoss.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So one of the things we're going to talk about today, Brad, is we're going to talk about the recent scandal that has kind of taken over involving the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as the Catholic Church, what do you think they could? Do you think they could use your skills as far as reputation management right now?
Well, they need a lot more than just reputation management. Obviously, what's come out of the last 2 weeks is criminal in nature. I mean, you've got the Pennsylvania report that is extensive and goes back decades, involving criminal activity, cover-ups, and a wide range of issues within the church itself. So systemically, they need to address those issues first and foremost. Branding and reputation flow from that, and how they handle that internally. So, they've got quite a task on their hands.
So, according to media reports, and you being in the media business, we know that not 100% of the things that come from the media may be 100% accurate 100% of the time, but at least the reports that seem to be consistent are vetted from documents that have come from the grand jury or come directly from the Attorney General's office in Pennsylvania, and those folks that were sort of charged with gathering the information and trying to determine, what the scope was of the nature of these allegations and how widespread it went and who was involved. So as far as that scandal, at least there should be some reliability because the information came directly from the folks that were charged with investigating these sources. Sure.
Yeah. And again, I'll make it clear, I don't speak for the Catholic Church or any organization affiliated with them. My job and my career has been spent in marketing, online, advertising to a degree, and also brand and reputation management. So when I discuss things, it's really just from an outsider's viewpoint of the industry of brand and reputation management and marketing. So you mentioned the sources themselves. Well, when you dive into the reports, the sources are the church themselves. So a lot of these reports and a lot of this information is coming directly from within the church itself. And so when we start sorting through information, it's important to have multiple sources. So not only did a lot of the information come from the church, but it also came from the investigation through the Attorney General's office of Pennsylvania. So they interviewed multiple victims, multiple accusers, and people within the organization itself. So the best way to vet information is to have multiple sources for that information. And wherever you see those similarities line up, that's usually where you find the truth.
So I know that if you don't know anything about this Vatican and church scandal or the situation with the priests in Pennsylvania over the last week or so, you're not paying attention because it's everywhere.
You're living under a rock.
Yeah, you're living
right.
under a rock.
Yeah.
But just so everybody has kind of an understanding, let's get to the meat of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then once we get to the meat of it, we can talk about kind of what happens next.
Sure.
Okay. So as a lawyer, you hear that that there is at least 300 priests that have been found or have been investigated or that have been named by name in Pennsylvania that are affiliated with either being pedophiles themselves or being involved in some sort of cover-up or direct conspiracy to cover up allegations of child sexual abuse. What do you know about that? Am I accurate with the number?
I mean, from the reports that I've read, and it's coming from major news outlets as well, that sounds accurate as far as what I've seen so far. Yes.
So 300, and then they've identified at least 1,000 victims. Is that number consistent with at least?
Yeah, that seems to be the same number I'm reading in different reports as well.
Okay, so you have at least over 1,000 folks that have been identified by name as somebody that has been possibly victimized or has provided evidence or testimony that this has happened to them at some point in their lifetime. And it's pretty shocking that this, we've heard this before. People, you hear jokes about, oh, there's jokes in the Catholic community about this. I was born and raised Catholic, as were you. So it's not like this story is the first time we've heard something along these lines with Catholic priests.
Yeah, and not only Catholic priests, but other organizations as well. And while the Catholic Church is getting the brunt of a lot of the legal attention and the media attention, and it seems like that every few weeks or every few months there's another scandal that comes about. And being raised Catholic myself, and you mentioned that before, it hurts. It's sad. It's not only sad, it's shocking, but it hurts because there are a lot of people, myself included, that have had a great childhood within the Catholic Church. I did. I never had any, specific issues or anything. I mean,
neither did I.
Yeah, my family was raised, through the Catholic Church, and they do so much good throughout their organization, throughout the world, that unfortunately something like this that is so systemic and seems to just keep coming up over and over again, it's got to be addressed differently than the way it's been addressed.
Right. Whatever has been happening in the past to deal with the situation or the problem or the horror needs to be done differently.
Absolutely.
So rather than, we're going to write a memo to somebody and then send this to somebody and try to fix it on our own, there needs to be, at least in my opinion, a higher level of law enforcement involvement when there's an allegation that's made within a community.
Correct. Yeah. And so, again, my expertise is in PR and marketing. So I can't speak to the systemic problems or issues or organizational changes that they may or may not be able to do. But from a PR perspective, I do know this, that people do not like the smell of a cover-up, regardless of what it is, whether it's government, whether it's a church, whether it's any type of organization, particularly when that organization is involved in the lives of families and children. No one will tolerate a cover-up. And when you start smelling a cover-up and you start seeing it over and over and over again, and then you start pulling through the layers and seeing that now this cover-up seems to extend all the way to the Vatican, according to the latest allegations from the Pennsylvania AG. And he's just one state. There are other states already looking at taking action.
In countries, other states and countries.
Absolutely. I mean, we can only speak for what we're seeing here in the U.S., but obviously this is a global issue. So, this goes beyond just PR management. This is a systemic problem within the organization, top to bottom. But then also, it really smells of a cover-up, and that's what, from a public relations standpoint, that's got to be addressed first and foremost. It's got to be a real. If there's going to be any type of recovery, or for the church or for people within the church, okay, not just the victims, but think about the millions and millions of people that are members of the Catholic Church. That has nothing to do with this. That are strictly just good people trying to, live a good life and worship the way they want to worship and be involved in their community. They're victims of this too, because now there's a stigma that could be attached to people that had nothing to do with this. They're completely innocent of any wrongdoing at all, but the stigma can stick for a very, very long time, and that's difficult to get rid of when you see efforts or indications of cover-up.
Well, I think that one of the things, as far as this grand jury report and the testimony that came out relating to the priests in Pennsylvania, there were some very shocking allegations that came out. One of the allegations was that there was a group of priests that would give the boys that they had victimized or had planned to victimize gold crosses that was almost like a symbol for the other.
It was a signal to other.
It was
other
a predator
predators.
signal that if these boys are wearing this cross, they're fair game. They're not going to rat you out or something. It was like basically labeling them as okay to victimize. So they have, and that information came directly from documents that were provided by the Catholic Church.
Itself, yes.
So the fact that you're getting these outrageous allegations that are coming directly from the church, it makes you wonder what documents were not kept or were destroyed, or what don't we know? If what we know is things that are as outrageous as these allegations with these little boys that wore crosses like this.
Yeah.
I assume little boys. I mean, maybe also little girls.
Oh, there was allegations of that.
So just and taking that to the next level of where they also created pornography on church premises and distributed the pornography. Yeah. So you really, of the 300 folks that were identified, most of them, I think with the exception of 2, are not able to be prosecuted at this point because of the statute of limitations. Right. So we'll discuss statute of limitations and maybe some more thoughts from you on, your media suggestions for the Catholic Church, or your other ideas that you may have that can help them moving forward as a non-lawyer person in the community. But we're going to take a break to hear from our sponsors. You're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Radio.
I never try too hard. I'm so awesome, so effortlessly.
Hey guys, this is Connor.
This is Dick.
This is Chris.
And we're with the Ticket Stub Podcast every Thursday live at noon on 104.5 and 106.1 FM in the Conroe area. Also, anytime at irlonestar.com. You go to irlonestar.com/TTS. You can find all of our social media.
And don't forget, we give away 2 tickets to the Grand Theater on every show.
If you like movies and you like complaining or celebrating anything that has to do with the silver screen, check out the Ticket Stub Podcast and join us every Thursday at noon o'clock on Lone Star Community Radio.
An estimated 1 in 10 births will result in a neonatal intensive care stay, also known as the NICU. Overnight, a family can find themselves and their newborn baby in a critical situation. The Mila Foundation financially and spiritually assists families in need. If you would like to volunteer or become a monthly sponsor, please visit us at www.themilafoundation.org. Again, that's www.themilafoundation.org, because every life matters.
Lone Star Community Radio is looking for those who are interested in hosting their own talk show, with monthly and weekly slots available on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and on irlonestar.com. Start your own podcast, create your first YouTube channel, and be on TV. Contact Lone Star Community Radio online at irlonestar.com or call the station message line at 936-647-3776 to take your first step into the radio world.
This is Andrea Kolsky, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Radio. And today we are joined with BTRoss, advertising guru, media specialist, reputation manager, all around fabulous individual if you need your advertising needs met. Thank you for taking time out to be on our show today.
Thank you for the glowing introduction.
So before the break, we were talking a little bit about statute of limitations, and for the folks that are just tuning in now, we were visiting how the Catholic Church is once again in the media spotlight because of some priests that have come to light in Pennsylvania that were victimizing children in some of the most horrific ways you may have ever heard. But in addition to that, most of them, out of 300, I believe that there are 2 that are able to now be prosecuted. So you hear these horrible and outrageous allegations of terrible sex abuse, and then you find out like, well, it's too late, nothing we can do about it now. So as far as statute of limitations, if you come forward in Texas and you say that you were sexually abused, when you first outcry, that's kind of where the timeline starts. There's no statute limit. You can come forward when you're 85 and say something happened to you, but if you've already told someone, there is a timeline on when a lawsuit would need to be brought or when charges would have to happen. So that's kind of where the time, after you're 18 and you tell someone, I guess. So that's where the timeline would kind of be in Texas. Is it all depends on who you told and when you told them, whether the statute of limitations has run.
And that's if It's a legal investigation.
Criminal
right?
investigation.
Or
criminal
That's
investigation.
it. That's if you actually get law enforcement involved.
Right.
And what we're seeing is that in most of these cases, if not all of the ones that the AG of Pennsylvania brought up, there was a concerted effort to keep law enforcement out of it, to keep it within the church. We can handle this ourselves. We'll address it ourselves. And again, back to what I said before the break, that smells of a cover-up. Again, that's the fox guarding the hen house.
Well, and if you have kids that go to their parents and they say, this is what happened to me, at least in Texas, those folks are mandatory reporters. They have to report
Right.
that to law enforcement.
Right.
Now, if it happens in the church and they say, oh, well, we don't feel like going to law enforcement because it happened in the church and maybe we can pray about it, or, maybe we're going to go to other folks in our community that are in the church community and they can give us better guidance because they know better, spiritually what we're supposed to do with this information.
Right. And we don't operate that way with any other organization. We don't tolerate that with schools. If you find out a school official or administrator or teacher or something like that is doing something that's untoward with children or whatever, in any way,
gone. Right.
they're gone. They instantly report it to the police. Same thing with businesses.
and
Same
they're
thing with every
suspended.
other organization.
So they're suspended, ask questions later. It's
Right.
protect the kids, ask questions later.
Right. But instead, what part of the issue that I see in the public eye is that when you read through these reports and you read through these allegations and everything that you describe, it just seems like the church was more concerned about protecting the church, not about protecting the individual children, not about addressing an issue. And this is a problem within organizations. Organizations have this issue when they aren't able to step outside themselves and say, wait a minute, we need to do the right thing first, okay, then address the organization second. But let's address what's happening right here, right now, particularly if it's criminal activity, immediately. And then we'll take steps from there. I mean, it's cause for alarm when your house is on fire and you say, well, hang on a second, I'm going to walk down the street because I'm hungry first. And then I'll come back and call the fire department and come put out the fire. No, you instantly call the authorities to help you with a terrible situation that you're trying to address.
Well, what's interesting you say about that is I once represented a client who, as his house was burning down, his wife was eating Chinese food on the front porch. Now she did, kind of outside. So
Right.
it was interesting that she did make that decision
Right.
that she needed to feed herself.
Which makes it very suspect, doesn't it? About, what happened in that fire.
The police ruled out arson, but
Right.
she didn't seem to have a care in the world.
Well, at least she wasn't hungry.
So that answers your question. But as far as, so in reference to what you're saying, from a reputation standpoint, what Catholic Church has got to save the good people, put the best face forward, and they've got to change the playbook.
They got to change her. Really, it's cultural. But what they have right now is a crisis management problem, not a branding problem. So they have to deal with the crisis that's at hand. And as I mentioned before the break, people want to see that you're forthcoming with information. So if I am helping any organization or any group, depending on the scale of the organization, the scale of the group, the first thing you do is make it very clear that you're going to come clean with everything. You allow a third party, outside, objective auditor or investigator, if it's law enforcement, whatever it is, that overall is a trusted third party to come in and vet the entire organization from top to bottom and make that clear, announce that to everybody and everyone, including the people that they really owe it to the most, and that is their parishioners. They're the actual members themselves.
Well, I think that that's a good point. I think that if you have if you have a priest that has been alleged to have engaged in this conduct, then you let all the other parishioners know there's allegations. They may turn out not to be credible, but just so you can protect yourself and your family. And, we no longer have him in charge of the nursery.
Yeah.
Or, he's not running Sunday school for the 8-year-olds anymore.
And announce that policy
Right.
change. Again, these are the steps towards healing a lot of the pain that really can't ever be undone, but towards healing the reputation and healing the brand of the church itself and begin that road to recovery. While you're addressing the things internally, make it clear that you're addressing it. A tweet doesn't do it. A couple of emails here and there saying, oh, well, we're doing our best, we're going to do this. Make it clear to people that, look, we're getting law enforcement involved. We are opening up our church, our books, whatever they need. We are going to come clean. There won't be any more even hint of a cover-up. That begins the road to healing their reputation. I can't address the issues or whatever, but any organization has to do that. Our government has to do that. Whenever we find corruption within our government, what do? We go in there and we want to see what all's going on. And anybody who clams up or runs away or hides information, shreds emails or whatever, we get very suspect of. I mean, we had presidential candidates that were accused of shredding documents and forgetting about emails, thousands of emails or whatever, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat. When those things happen, those people lose the public trust. You lose trust.
You lose credibility.
And so you can't regain trust by continuing to act untrustworthy.
And I think that is a good policy change for the church. Instead of just be transparent, this is our new policy. We're not just going to say that we're going to do better. We're going to show you how we're going to do better.
You treat issues externally, not internally.
We're going to say this is our new policy. If someone makes an allegation, we will call law enforcement.
Right. And this is really a lesson for all organizations and religious organizations, because we know that the Catholic Church is not the solo in this.
It could be any church.
This could be anywhere, and it is.
Right,
it is
exactly.
Unfortunately in other places, because you have people that take advantage of these situations and take advantage of their position to take advantage of people that are vulnerable. And regardless of what religion they are or organization or whatever, we have people abuse their power all the time.
And that is, as a former child abuse prosecutor, as someone that deals with these types of cases as a defense attorney, when you have a perpetrator who is going to victimize a child, they are going to find a child that's vulnerable or a family structure that's vulnerable, or they're going to put that they are going to groom the child and get them in a way where they know what buttons to press, where the child either won't disclose till they're older, or won't disclose in a way that's going to harm that individual. I know that there was one allegation about a priest that had sexually abused 5 sisters in the same family. And I think you know this story, that the mother knew about the first 3, right?
Yeah.
And then how does that story end?
Yeah, it doesn't. The sad part is that story doesn't end. Again, it goes back to abuse of power.
Well, but I mean, as far as the mother said that even though she knew her other kids had been abused at that Catholic school, she didn't know any other way for her kids to get into heaven.
Right. So
she, said, I'm going to put my faith here. And so that mother is the type of person that was easy to victimize, or her family was easy to victimize, because she was looking for something that the church was providing. And I'm sure gave her some good parts of her life.
Yeah.
But then they say, okay, but then this is what happened.
I mean, it's the same mentality where you saw televangelists taking millions of dollars from people, promising great things. Oh, you're going to have your prayers answered. You're going to have this happen for you or whatever. And it turns out that they're crooks. And again, it's abusing trust, and it's abusing positions of power. When people have faith, people of faith, they look to their leadership as having special authority within certain segments of their lives. And unfortunately, there's a percentage of those people that find their way towards these positions, and they wind up abusing that authority. And that's where openness and being forthright with information and having a steadfast policy that declares that anyone who suspects anything, go to law enforcement, because they are a third-party entity. They don't have a vested interest here. Sure, some individuals maybe. I mean, you saw even in Pennsylvania, members of the grand jury, they were members of the Catholic Church. So they didn't want this to happen, but it was the truth. The truth came out about all these allegations, so they had to. So for individuals that that take advantage of these positions of power, it needs to be made clear as a policy that, look, we're going to report anything and it's going to go to the authorities. You're going to be reported.
Well, here's the other flip side, and I hate to play devil's advocate in this situation, but the other situation is that, the Catholic Church has reportedly paid $3.8 billion in settlements relating to sexual abuse allegations that we know of in the last couple of decades or the last few decades. So that being said, as a defense attorney, having had children, I mean, I hate to say it, lie, because people don't want to believe that children can lie and say that these things happen when they don't. But I, as a defense attorney, have either exposed lies that children have told. I've seen them, where people come forward years later and they say, I said this when I was a child. It wasn't true. So the other flip side is that as a defense attorney, we have to, I know, like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate, but knowing that if I say this, it could be a payday for me, it does also create perhaps a false sense of a lot of these allegations aren't true, or some of these allegations may not be true, and they need to be investigated from a truthful standpoint. And if the solution is just fire everybody and stroke the checks, then people of all religions are going to say, okay, if I say this happened, whether it happened or not, or if I find myself alone with a priest and they have the opportunity, then I can follow through with the rest of the things that happened after that.
Right. And that goes back to establishing within an organization, we're using the church as obviously the biggest headline right now, but in any organization, you have to have policies in place in how you would deal with these things in an outside manner. Because right now they've been dealing with them internally, and they have documents that talk about here's how we're going to treat this, and we're going to file this over here. They have secret files and all these things. That didn't work. They know that now.
Right.
But moving forward, any organization has to have a policy that addresses every possible scenario. If somebody's accused of this, or this is what happens, we go to the authorities, and we as a republic, we have laws that are in place to try to vet out these situations. And you said it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But from an organizational standpoint, at least you want to have some trust that what they're doing is going to do right by my kids, right by my family, and right by my money and my time. Because, it's one thing that you have a lot of allegations of people being abused in criminal activity. But then when you talk about the money that's involved in a lot of organizations, whether it's charities or churches or whatever, and a lot of that money is squandered. Well, what are the processes that are in place that we can see as an outsider, right? That will show this is where all this money goes if you give money to this organization or this church.
Right.
And we need to be very stringent about that as a people. Before we give up our kids, before we give up our time, and before we give up our money, what we need to do is our own homework a little bit and find out, okay, how exactly does this organization manage my kids, my money, and my time? And if anything goes bad, what system is in place to address it right away so that it doesn't become a widespread problem?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because there is a local priest, and I say local meaning Texas, that is being investigated in Dallas. He's been a priest for 27 years, and I think that he originally hails from the Philippines. And he's being investigated for not only sexual abuse, but also for stealing money from the church. So they're saying that he stole, and when I say they, the reports are that he has stolen between $60,000 and $80,000 from the church. So he was suspended because of that. And then there were some grown folks, some adults that came forward and said, at least 3 folks said that they had been sexually abused by him when he was at the church. So, as a defense attorney, if he's innocent of those allegations, you want to clear your good name.
Right.
But, this individual has gone on the lam, I guess is the best way to put it. So I would just say, in future litigation, flight is evidence of guilt. If you have a trial and you say, well, when you were supposed to be investigated about these.
I suddenly moved. Yeah.
I suddenly moved to the Philippines, a place that I had not lived in 27 years. It is certainly, and then I had to be extradited to return. that would certainly be, at least if I was a fact finder, that would seem suspicious.
Right.
So I would, as a lawyer for that priest, I would say, stay put.
Right.
Don't go anywhere.
And
You know?
lawyers, a lot of times, does it pass the common sense test? Does
Right.
the person in the general public, when they look at these facts, think, well, this person looks guilty? Sorry, but that's your reputation. You look guilty.
So when we'll finish covering this topic, and then we'll talk about some other interesting things that happened in Dallas today involving a police officer involved shooting. After the break, we're going to take a break to hear from our sponsors. We're on the radio at what channels, Brad?
104.5 and 106.1.
And
Lone
if you
Star
can't
Radio.
find us there, Dick, where can they find us all day, every day, around the clock, around the world?
Justice is Blonde's Facebook, Justice is Blonde on YouTube, and of course their podcast page on iTunes and Google Play.
This is Justice is Blonde.
That's right. That's right, my generation. That's right.
Hey, Montgomery County and online listeners. Thank you so very much for checking out Jazzy Vibes with Soul. What? You haven't done so yet? Well, you've got to tune in. Hi, I am the host of Jazzy Vibes with Soul, Miss CeCe Holmes, and I invite you to check us out every Friday and Saturday from 7 until 9 p.m., where you will get the best in old school R&B and, of course, a little smooth jazz to make it jazzy. So tune in. That's right, tune in every Friday and Saturday right here on Conroe's 104.5 and 106.1 FM or worldwide at irlonestar.com.
Are you interested in learning more about preparing quick, healthy, and safe meals for your family? Would you like to spend time with others learning tips and tricks, along with practicing and tasting nutritious food? If so, the On the Road to Healthy Living Mobile Cooking School is for you. Call Amy Ressler at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service at 936-539-7825 to find a class near you or volunteer to host a class.
Don't forget to download the Lone Star Community Radio app from your Google Play or Apple Store. Bring Montgomery County's community radio with you anywhere with your smartphone or tablet. If you are in the Conroe area, tune in on FM. That's Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1. If you are on the computer, bookmark irlonestar.com as your internet radio station. A Lone Star Community Radio. Broadcasting 24/7 from the heart of downtown Conroe, Texas.
Yeah, we're all about a good time. Yeah, we're all about a good life. You won't believe it's who you see. This is gonna be a fun ride. Yeah, we're all about a
This is Andrea Kolsky, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Radio. And today we're joined with Brad Ross, who owns his own consulting firm, media specialist, media expert. And if you're only listening on the radio, he's also very handsome. So you're missing out on that aspect. Brad, we were talking before the break about the Vatican crisis, I would say, and, the priest scandal, which seems to keep rearing its ugly head.
Yeah, it does.
And when I say the priest scandal, I think everybody listening knows what we're talking about. And you and I are raised Catholics.
Yeah.
So we want to feel good about being Catholic. So how do we do that? How do we get people feeling good about the Catholic religion again?
Well, first of all, they've got to address all the criminal activity within the organization. They have to come clean, completely clean, and be completely transparent in every way, shape, or form. I said earlier, anything that smells of a cover-up, anything that smells like you're hiding information or trying to distract away from issues that have been raised that are very serious, disturbing, long-term issues, anything that smells like you're trying to distract away from that is only going to elongate their problem. It's only going to continue, and they will lose membership. They will lose. I mean, they're already starting. There are reports now. There's stories out now that the donations to the church are way down. I mean, people just, it doesn't feel good right now. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and again, this applies to really any organization, not just the Catholic Church, but any major group organization. when they make these changes, they need to hold fast to it, and they need to publicize it. They need to make it clear to everybody, both within and without the organization, that this is what we're doing. And we're an open book. We welcome, we're having, whether it's law enforcement or other individuals that are trusted in a third party way, come in and really audit the entire system and then make changes. And some of the changes can be suggested by the parishioners themselves, the members themselves. Instead of top-down management, in crisis mode, an organization needs to look to the people that make that organization what it is. And that is the tens, hundreds of millions of Catholics across the globe. The central power network of the church needs to look to them for suggestions in how they can heal and what do they offer to say, what can we do to make our church better? What can we, it's like a company asking its customers, how can we be better? How can we better serve you? What do you need from us? And I can tell you this, that being raised Catholic myself, we talked about that. In my family, a topic of discussion often was, why don't priests marry? Methodist ministers marry, and every other Christian denomination has ministers and pastors that get married and have families, and it's no big deal. But the Catholic Church doesn't. And that's something I think that's been a point of contention for a long time, and maybe it's time to address that. I don't know that addresses this particular problem that's within the church, but it's certainly something that I know as a parishioner myself years ago discussed and wondered aloud, why not? And there was never really any solid answer as to the biblical source of that. Well,
it's not just not marrying; it's celibacy.
Yeah, right.
So you take a vow of celibacy in other religions, like obviously if you're getting married,
right?
They're not expecting that you're taking that vow.
No. So every organization has to evolve. When these things happen, they have to evolve. To keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. So you see this in religious organizations. I mean, the Mormons, for instance, now allow female, leadership that they didn't before. I mean, every religious organization, company, business, if you're going to succeed and you're going to thrive, you have to evolve. And usually that evolution comes from difficulty. This is a very difficult time for the Catholic Church, and they have to evolve from it.
Well, and I think
be willing to evolve.
Well, and I think that the Pope has shown that he is static on some issues. I mean, it has. Does static mean you change?
Static means you don't change.
Okay.
You mean he's flexible?
He's flexible.
Yes.
So the issues I'm referring to is recently in the past year, he has said that we no longer support the death penalty, which has been around, it's always been sort of an enigma in the Catholic Church, which is that thou shalt not kill is one of the commandments, but we believe in the death penalty, which is, that has always been confusing to me how we get there. Sure. And then additionally, there has been some discussion that homosexuality may not be as bad as some folks like to think that the Catholics think it is. So there's been some softening on at least those two positions since Pope Francis has been the Pope. Right. So it shows he is capable of realizing that we live in a world where things change that may have been, well, this was the tradition before. And, the tradition before was also to kick folks out of the church that were divorced and they couldn't take communion. Yeah. So
it's that willingness to evolve.
When half the people in the country get divorced, that's kind of ostracizing half your community. So I do think that just kind of realizing that religions and everything else, we have to use technology at the DA's office now. If I want to get an offense report, it's available online. Do I like that? Not particularly. I'd rather have it printed out for me. But, the fact is that we had to evolve. And I think that that's what the Catholic Church needs to do if it wants to get a strong membership and keep a strong membership. So I hope they...
When you gain new information, it's what you do with it.
Right.
And if you choose to ignore it or refuse it, well, you can certainly do that. And organizations are just like individuals. They sometimes ignore information and sometimes they absorb it or they try to bury it or whatever. But with new information, if it impacts your organization, then it's really up to you as an organization to make a dedicated effort to evolve one way or another. If it's true, then you need to evolve if you plan to survive and thrive into the future. And I think that every church, not just the Catholic Church, every organization owes it to their members to evolve as the membership, feels is necessary for the betterment of their church or their organization,
Community,
because
their
it is a
community.
family. I
Right,
mean,
their
that is a
community.
family to them. You don't, you just can't stick your head in the sand and hope it goes away and operate like it's, the 1400s. You can't do that. And in a lot of ways, the Catholic Church has evolved over time in subtle ways, but now they're really facing a big time crisis. And I think that within crisis, there is opportunity. And I
Right.
think that's really the way they need to look at it.
They can come out bigger and better and stronger.
They certainly can.
And they can take this media attention that they're getting and they can turn it around and have people say, well, this is
Right.
This is a great.
But it won't happen overnight. As you know,
Right.
being a criminal defense attorney, it takes time. It takes time to get through all the investigation. It takes time to get all the information. It takes time to vet all your sources of information. But if you're willing to put in the time and you're willing to make changes as information comes available to you, you will be a better organization for it.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of folks that are members of the Catholic Church where it's, they're going to be more dedicated to their faith because they're going to
Absolutely.
say, the Catholic Church needs me. They need people
Right.
like me, and they
Right.
need more people that, are.
Yeah.
So I feel like that, like you said, it could be a.
There could be a silver lining
could
to
be a
this very
silver
dark
lining,
cloud.
right.
Yeah, I agree.
So, changing topics, we had talked a little bit before the break how there was an interesting development that had just happened today in Dallas. So, there was a police officer that was convicted. Roy Oliver was convicted today of murder for shooting a unarmed African-American teenager who was leaving a house party. And 15 years old, you have a son that's 15 years old.
Yes.
And just to think that he could go to a house party and just be leaving and end up not making it home when he was not doing anything wrong is just devastating and heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
So as far as him being convicted of murder, I've read some statistics that it's either 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 police officers are ever actually convicted of police officer involved shootings, and I believe that and the victim in this case was, what was his name? Do you remember?
Edwards?
Jordan Edwards. Yes, Jordan Edwards. The victim, Jordan Edwards, in this case. He, I think, was just a very sympathetic person. He was, doing great things with his life. Hard to argue that he was a danger to the law enforcement. I think they were in a car. I don't know how they rose to the level of reaching that deadly force where the officer killed him. But in order to be convicted of murder, you have to intentionally cause the death of a person. So the jury found that he did that intentionally. They, I believe, had the lesser opportunities. They could have convicted him of manslaughter if they felt that there was some sudden passion or something along those lines that was more reckless. If it was a reckless act, that could have been manslaughter. And then, you have negligent homicide, criminally negligent homicide, where if they thought that he had a gross deviation of standard of the ordinary care of somebody in that position, he could have been convicted of criminally negligent homicide. But the jury convicted Officer Roy Oliver of the highest, hardest, toughest charge. In Texas, we don't distinguish first, second, third degree murders like they do in some other states. It's just murder. Murder is first degree,
Right.
or murder is the maximum punishment that you can get. It's a first degree. So
Right.
the jury has the opportunity now. In Texas, we're one of the 2 states that determine sentencing. So the jury then moves on to the sentencing portion where they're in sentencing right now to determine how much time Roy Oliver gets in prison, because he can only get between 5 and 99 years or life in prison. It used to be when I first started practicing, you could get probation for murder. But you have to get that from a jury.
Okay.
And actually back then there was ways that you could get it from a judge, but it would have been very difficult. Because it would be tough to think of a probation murder that the judge would want to do that. But,
Right.
Juries have the full range of punishment. So we'll find out by next week what happened to Roy Oliver as far as sentencing.
So you mentioned a statistic. one out of what? What is it? 1 out of 6?
It's 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6.
Yes. So 1 out of 6 officers that are involved in a
Police officer involved shooting that are charged.
That are actually charged and convicted. Is that right? Or
Right.
charged?
That are charged are ultimately convicted.
Convicted. Okay.
1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6.
Okay. So this happening is a rare occurrence.
It's rare and it's a really big deal. I will say that we'll get into more what some of the reasons are that I think that maybe his case might have been different from other cases.
Mm-hmm.
After the break, I'll leave you guys on pins and needles for what my brain thinks is one of the motivating factors. But right now we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors. You can hear us on FM radio, Brad.
FM 104.5 and 106.1 Lone Star Community Radio.
You're listening to Justice is Blonde.
And I get it done. I speak for the ones who do it best. That's right, my generation. That's right.
What is homelessness? Have you seen parents struggle to find a job without having transportation or childcare? What about the children sleeping in cars with nothing to eat? Families shouldn't have to struggle to survive, and children should not be homeless. Family Promise of Montgomery County serves the needs of homeless families and their children. Learn about ways you can help and learn about partnership opportunities at www.familypromiseofmc.org or call our day center at 936-441-8778.
A Lone Star Community Radio is ready for the summer. If you or anyone you know is looking for summer internship opportunities, a Lone Star Community Radio is a great place to grab the mic and be on the air. A Lone Star Community Radio offers a great opportunity to those interested in learning about the radio world all year round. Be an on-air personality, talk show producer, or YouTube, TV, podcast editor. Contact the station at info@irlonestar.com or call the station's message line at 936-647-3776.
This is Andrea Kolsky, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde, and we're wrapping up the show talking about something that's active and ongoing right now here in Texas. We have Officer Roy Oliver just got convicted in Dallas of murder. He, while on duty, shot and killed a unarmed 15-year-old African-American boy, and the jury came back with a murder conviction today. They're now in the sentencing phase. The father of the young man said that this verdict was actually a tribute to all the other unarmed African-American boys and teenagers that had not been convicted by the shootings of
in other cases
by white police officers. One of the things that I think was different about this officer than other officers is that, and some of the other officer-involved shootings, maybe they had no disciplinary history or they had no issues or they had a clean record and there was not anything that the jury could hang their hat on and say, well, other than this instance, he had good character. So I think that one of the things that they probably focused on was the fact that at least this officer, who had not been an officer very long, he had a prior disciplinary issue for his anger where he had some outbursts in the courtroom because he had to testify. And it was so, I guess, bad or outrageous that they made him go to anger management classes. So you kind of had a situation where the jury got to hear and be on notice that maybe he was more angry or more of a hothead than somebody that was just going through the motions and trying to do their job and was just drastically made the wrong choice or decision.
Yeah.
So I know that while the jury was deliberating and deciding the issue, they did say that what if we are split about the justification for the murder? And I think that's something that when you find out what the jury verdict is and when we know what that is, we'll know, more about what was going on in their minds about why they came up with the sentence that they came up with.
Right.
So as far as law enforcement, they certainly, right now, they could use some reputation management. It seems like they have sort of a negative. What do you suggest about that?
I think that's an ongoing thing that, you have different segments of the community, depending on the community that highly respect law enforcement, that have a great, I guess they maintain a really strong image, and then other areas of the community where they don't. And I think that's across the board throughout this country. Healing divisions between groups of people really that's not the job of the police. However, by again applying some of the same things that we talked about earlier in regards to the Catholic Church or any organization, by making it clear that, hey, we're not going to tolerate police officers that do this or do that or act like this or whatever. And by the way, here are the steps that we're taking to make sure that it doesn't happen. Because you and I both know that the vast majority of police officers have an incredibly difficult job. And it's hard to determine what's going on, particularly in an emergency situation. They're put in very challenging situations, and they have to make split-second decisions. And it's not a job that a lot of us would ever want to do. And I'm so thankful that so many of them do the great job that they do. But again, applying that same principle of openness, being transparent, saying, look, we don't cover anything up. And I think we do have a lot of police forces throughout the United States that are making a very strong effort to do just that, to make sure that they vet every single member of their police force and make sure that the community is aware of it.
Now, wrapping up the show, I will say that there is a gentleman out of California named Paul Gonzalez that really could use your reputation management help, because he is gaining quite the reputation for being just a despicable person. He is known as the dine and dash guy. So what he does is he vets women and has dates with them, and then he splits on the check. He says he's going to get a car charger.
He meets them through online dating services.
He meets them through online
dating services, yeah.
And he usually will take them to a restaurant and order like a very extravagant meal, like shrimp, lobster, and steak, and then he'll take off. And so just so you know, ladies, there is some responsibility that the men have to pick up a portion of the checks in those situations, because he's now being prosecuted by.
Yeah, he's facing 10 years?
He's facing up to 13 years for the number of additional counts that they're charging him with. So his appetite has finally caught up to him. Let's just say. So Mr. Gonzalez certainly could probably use a reputation makeover when this whole situation.
Well, I don't know that his reputation can really be helped.
I don't know that it can be helped
as far as the dating reputation, but for any guys out there or women, it's always a safe bet to go to coffee first. That way, if they do dine and dash, you're only out about $1.50. So
that's great advice.
Yeah,
that's great advice.
Not a bad way to protect yourself on both sides of the table.
Thank you for listening. This is Justice is Blonde, and we are available on 104.1, 106.5. We're on Channel 12 on Suddenlink. Actually, some of my clients who end up incarcerated sometimes get to see me in jail, because the jail does carry Suddenlink and also Justice is Blonde. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
That's right, my generation. That's right. That's right. That's right, my generation. Yeah.